Lunar Princess Ranni. She killed Godwyn, Witch of the Dark Moon, the last heir of Caria, uh, the Carians, however you want to describe it. I think I do say the word wrong, Carians. I kind of switch from between them, but basically the last heir. And the last actually remaining princess, besides Rhaanna, I believe that's her name. That is actually more in the operational sense in terms of their actually lineage and actually nobility of the Carians, and she's definitely an interesting character. As before, she's right here, you know. But this video is going to be extremely difficult. So here's basically a baseline and a reminder. I'm going to give you a reminder that this is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is up to a lot of interpretations and stuff like that too, and everything like that. For many different reasons, because the game is just so beautiful and expansive in many ways possible that a lot of things are up to interpretations, and the story is built for like basically to be like that. So this is going to be my interpretation of basically Elden Ring's version of Ranni's. And why I say Elden Rings is because Elden Ring Night Ring is coming out, and I think she might play a big part in that one. So we're just going to say the original Elden Ring. But let's talk about Ranni. We need a baseline for Ranni. Obviously, I'm going to go through the steps as all my Elden Ring lesson videos go. I'm going to talk about who Ranni is and stuff like that. But I need a base. I'm going to give you a baseline first. This video is going to be highly inspired by another Elden Ring lore creator, which, well, I'm not really a lore creator. I talk more about the lessons that you can learn from Elden Ring. But this YouTuber, content creator, basically studies the lore and stuff like that, is Jack is a Mimic. This video right here highly influences this video. I recently watched it, and it changed my whole point of view about Ranni. Ranni, for the baseline right now, Ranni is very connected into the main storyline when it comes to the Tarnish. But things seem too much out there to be a coincidence. And that video, Jack is a Mimic, he was talking about basically rough line guideline when it came to Ranni, was that Ranni is actually connected to Miquella or Saint Trina. I'm pretty sure more Saint Trina, because you're connected to both sleep and stuff like that. And he touches about many topics, such as Ranni's could be a doll of Miquella or Saint Trina. The biggest evidence that he was able to prove, which I will talk about in this video, and highly recommend to go watch this video. I have all the stuff in the description down below, channel and the video itself. I highly recommend to go watch that. Like this video. Go watch that video, like that video, subscribe, highly recommend. Really good lore creator. And then come back here and then we'll talk about the lessons that can come from that. But it's not like I'm taking parts of it. I just really taking parts of his like lore theory or anything like that. I just really believe in his theory. Like, it's a really solid theory, and it really explains a lot of things that can happen in real life, which is why we're going to talk about the baseline that I think I follow the same premise as Jack is a Mimic, but I'll slightly change it. I do think that Ranni charmed us to a certain degree. And I say that because the biggest piece of evidence was at the end of the game, we go into this pose where we bow. I'm going to show a clip right now showing what I was talking about. But we bow and all this other stuff. Actually, she gives her a dramatic speech about, you know, the age of the stars. And we are in the same position as when we get charmed by Miquella. And that's only see one of the biggest piece of evidence, unless we're missing like some core component that like all lords or something are supposed to bow in that way. The only piece of evidence that we have of people actually bowing that way is how we get charmed by Miquella. And it's really telling, because there's so many other ways to bow and so many other ways to do things, but we do the same exact pose or almost identical to the same pose as when we get charmed by Miquella. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. 100% not a coincidence. Another thing is that, like, when you're bowing, like, you know, when you're bowing, how we bow, when we summon her, like, we initially, like, I wouldn't say I don't know, it's really hard to explain. Jack is a Mimic explains it way better, but that's the premise we're going to talk about it, because if I were to explain it in the way I was thinking about it, the simple terms is that, like, I think we're half charm. Seems weird, but what I mean by half charm is that I think we're greatly influenced. Not like charmed like how Miquella does it, but I think we're greatly influenced. And there's many pieces of evidence that I can support this claim. The whole Ranni questline is greatly influenced. Literally, she's one of the first characters you could meet in the start of your journey, so it just goes to show how much influence she actually has. Another baseline we're going to talk about is that Ranni is split into two different chapters, I would call it. We have Lunar Princess, well, she's both Lunar Princess Ranni. We're going to talk about Lunar Princess Ranni and a piece of her humanity. And then there's Ranni the Witch, which is this one, the doll version, Ranni the Witch. But I would even argue there is three types. Basically, Lunar Princess Ranni, before the Night of the Black Knives. After, when she became Ranni the Witch, and she was trying to break herself from the Greater Will, which that's really false, because there's a lot of evidence showing that maybe the Greater Will. I always see the Greater Will as an overseer, but Ranni's like, how do I describe it? She talks about how she wants to break away from the Greater Will or anything like that, and she infers it, but I don't think the Greater Will really had any big point. If he did, then he planned this way from all the way to the start. Because like I said, I see him as an overseer, so I don't see him really stepping in like that, but just watching. And planning like little small things to lead you to the direction that he wants you to go. And the biggest thing, or he is the Greater Will, but the biggest thing is that for me, I believe, this is a little off topic, we're still doing the baseline. I know it's a very long foundation for the video, and the video may be the longest one yet, but this requires a lot of foundation, baseline, and basically explaining in detail what I exactly mean before we go into everything else. But back to what I was talking about, the Greater Will. I believe Ranni is a prisoner of the Greater Will, but by fate. Because I watched a theory about a prisoner theory that Ranni is actually a prisoner because like she discarded her flesh and she basically got rid of like her finger, or the two fingers. But the two fingers were probably not connected to Ranni at all, or like not connected to the Greater Will. I mean, like, so indirectly Ranni probably was not connected in some way, and that depends on a bunch of other theories. This is why Ranni is a very complex character, because yes, Ranni is Ranni, but there's so many theories about who Ranni actually is. For example, like I said earlier with the Jack is a Mimic lore video, which I highly recommend to watch again. Once again, I mean, to recommend it once again. But I believe they're connected to Mikola in some way. Mikola's doll, or Saint Trina, or some form. Obviously, I believe Ranni was her own person, but I highly think there's some type of correlation or some type of connection that we're missing. They could have been working together in some way, some form. I believe they were, but there's some things you always forget to think about when things are really, really dialing up, and that is that Mikola is a craftsman. Mikola is a craftsman. He created the gold needle. He created unalloyed gold. I wouldn't be surprised if he created the doll. Now, a lot of people think Celivis created the doll and anything like that. I'm pretty sure Celivis was around to maintain the doll because, it's been a humongously long time. But who's to say that Celivis actually created the doll? We don't know. And Celivis' character is so lackluster, not in terms of the lore or anything like that. We just don't know a lot to be able to infer that at all. We don't. Celivis himself may be a puppet. We have that other Abonoric was a Pedia. I think his name is Pedia. I think his name is, but I'm not too sure. A lot of people theorize that he's actually the real mastermind behind it, which I also believe that as well. Because Celivis, I think Celivis is a doll, but there's a lot of things that we don't know about these characters connected to Ranni, and that's another thing I want to touch upon. Which Ranni has a lot of people that are around and in her story, yet we know very little direct information. We have to infer a lot of it. The only thing we really have a lot of direct information on is what the characters actually say. Mainly the two closest one, Blythe and E.G. But E.G. is very, he's a war counselor and stuff like that. And, he says things here and now, and, we got a lot of lore from him. But E.G. also says a lot of things that we do not find out until we find out ourselves or do inferences and actually finding evidence towards that thing. E.G. does not explain a lot of things, despite us being, a companion and stuff like that too. Obviously, I don't think he's like has anything malicious. I just think that's just how his character is. You know, he is a war counselor, and you know, close to Ranni. Blythe, on the other hand, Blythe is much different. Blythe was also close to Ranni, Shadowbound Beast, but surprisingly, he never really talks about Ranni too much. EG is the only one that really talk about Ranni too much. So that just goes to show that there's really hard direct evidence towards Ranni. And Ranni's character, just like as I said again, with the Jack as a Mimic, highly recommend to watch it a third time. I know I'm not gonna fully highly recommend it throughout the video, maybe once in a while, because it's a really good video. Highly recommend it. But Jack as a Mimic says that Ranni lies. True, 100%. She's the witch of the Dark Moon. She caused the Night of the Black Knives. The whole Rogier questline shows that, you know, that Ranni is aware of these things, you know. So, another thing is, can Ranni's word be trusted? I think some of them can. Obviously, Ranni talks very much differently than other characters, for example, like Jiren or something like that, or like Ansbach or something like that. Ansbach and Jiren are a lot more direct. Ranni is not direct, nor does she have any characters that really directly talked about her, unless it was like E.G. reminiscing and nostalgia about back in the day. No one really talked directly about it, which is extremely hard to make a video about connections when the connections are very loosely in the first place. So, the foundations. Let's review before we get into the actual video. We're already 12 minutes in, but this is a very, very important basic part of the video to understand the rest of the video. One, which I highly recommend to do. Last recommendation is that Jack is a Mimic lore video will have a lot of influence on this video. As I said before, the two things you should really take away from that video and take away from this one in terms of the foundation part is that Ranni lies. 100%. Now, do I believe everything she says is a lie? No. I believe some of the stuff she says is a lie, especially early on. And we get more information about what she wants early on than later on. Of course, you know, she has that whole dialogue about... Forgive me if you can hear that noise. That's a helicopter flying over my house. But, she was talking... Obviously, she gives more information about what she wants early on in her questline. It's as simple as that. Later on, she does give some dialogue about what she wants and everything like that, but that describes the order and stuff like that, too, when you become her consort and stuff like that. Another thing is that I believe that Ranni is connected to Saint Trina or Mikola, or probably both, I would say. I would say that Lunar Princess Ranni, because remember I said I described Lunar Princess Ranni and Ranni the Witch as two different coalitions, and then I'll just say the Age of the Stars Ranni, which is when we're her consort. But I would say that she's connected to Mikola and Saint Trina in some way. I would say Saint Trina more because the connection to sleep and stuff like that, and the moon and the sleep and the night and all that stuff. But those are the main things you take away. Another thing is that Ranni has a lot of loose connections between characters, and that makes it hard to actually explain certain things without actually playing the game. And lastly, it's Ranni, one of the most influential characters in the series. And I say the series because, you know, Elden Ring Night Rain is going to come out. Maybe Ranni plays some part of that or like that, because it is called Night Rain. But who knows? Another thing is that, or I say series because the series is the events that happen throughout the Lands Betweens. Right, foundation done. I'm pretty sure most people have clicked out the video, but if you're still here, thank you very, very, very much for staying. And I'm pretty sure a good about 20 people, I know a lot of people do watch my videos, especially the last Elden Ring one, the guy about like, well, I posted the Godfrey video today, but the Sir Ansbach one got like about 600 views. So, you know, if you made it this far, thank you very much, and I'd like you to comment this thing down below. The comment is going to be, hey, what do you think about Ranni? And you know how I think about Ranni, and you know how Jack is a Mimic thinks about Ranni. Now I want to ask you guys, hey, what do you think about Ranni, Lunar Princess Ranni, or just Ranni in general? It doesn't matter what time period or all the time periods or anything like that. Now, I want to preface this. This video will have a negative impact. Well, not negative impact, but like it'll talk more about the negatives. Obviously, there is some pros to it, but I just want to do a disclaimer that I do actually like Ranni a lot. She was the first ending I got in Elden Ring, The Age of the Stars, just like many other people. That is the first the first ending I got in Elden Ring when I first played it a couple years now. Damn, it's been a long time. But I do like the character. I think she's a fantastic character in many ways possible. She makes the story very interesting, and I think her dynamics and her traits really are really good for storytelling in terms of the Elden Ring universe. But let's go straight into the video. Who is Lunar Princess Ranni? Lunar Princess Ranni, as I said before in the beginning of the video, the intro clip, she is the Witch of the Dark Moon. She's also the last heir of Caria, or Caria, or you want to describe it. The daughter of Radagon and Rennala. Before we get into anything specific like that, Rennala is an interesting case, along with Rayanna. I can't never say her name correctly. I think her name is Rayanna, but they're two very interesting characters. They're both were princesses of Caria, but Rennala is the only one that actually became queen because her older or younger sister basically went to go chase Mesmer and all of that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. The princesses of Caria are very, very interesting. So much information about them, but also very, very loosely. I noticed that all the Carian princesses, even Selen to agree, if you believe she's a Carian princess, there is a theory about her being that way. Do I believe that? Probably, maybe. She does have Carian ties due Jiren, so but their information very loosely. Very, very loosely. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But this is just a side note. I know this video has a lot of side notes, so forgive me, but this is Elden Ring with due respect. But Rennala is an interesting character. I think I've seen a theory that Rennala is actually a Empyrean. I wouldn't be surprised. She does have the backing of the full moon, and a lot of people, I've seen a theory, although I haven't watched it. I have it on my watch list, but I haven't watched it yet. Been really busy with business and work and all that other stuff. But a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, agree that Rennala is a suspicious character in terms of what her lineage and dynamics actually were back in the day. And she fought the armies of Gold. She fought Radagon and pretty much went to a stalemate. So she's pretty much powerful in some way, so a lot of people think she was actually the Glowmite Queen. Although I haven't watched the video yet, so I can't really give any traits about that. But this also leads to Ranni's lineage, which is why we're talking about who Ranni is. Ranni's lineage could be really, really expansive, more than we think already, more than we can confirm, right? We can confirm that she's a princess, right, under the Golden Order and the Carians, and Liurnia, basically. But if her mother was the Glowmite Queen, then that would be two Empyreans. Special birth. I would consider that a special birth, because look at the Empyreans that we have in the modern day. Obviously Melina could be the Glowmite Queen as well, so we're not going to add her on. That's where the complications get weird. But I am on the theory that Rennala could be a potential Empyrean and the Glowmite Queen, but her essence was taken away and gave to Melina, just like, the essence of what the Glowmite Queen actually was. But we don't know we don't know for sure. We just have to basically theorize. But we don't know. That's just a crazy theory, my crazy theory, along with other people's crazy theories. But let's talk about Lunar Princess Ranni. The whole reason why I was talking about that stuff is because her lineage is strong. And lineage for Ranni's early childhood and basically who she becomes really plays a big part. So who Lunar Princess Ranni is, she has an insane lineage. She has an insane bloodline. It goes back all the way to the Nox and to the Newman. And she's obviously a direct offspring of Marika, which is, Radagon and Marika are the same person. Basically like the whole Mikola and St. Trina deal. So very, very interesting dynamic. But let's get into the connections about what Ranni actually embodies. And like I said before, I'm going to talk about more of the negatives. The reason why I'm talking about more of the negatives is because this is an Elden Ring's lesson video. And I believe Ranni has more negatives than positives, especially for if you're trying to connect it to real life. One is that, like, Ranni's whole character is very, it talks like Ranni's whole character invokes a more negative mindset, and those two negative mindsets I can talk about in terms of the real life world is that isolation. Ranni's has a huge sense of isolation. I don't think a lot of people recognize that. Of course, she got like, you know, servants and, you know, Blythe and stuff like that. Blythe, Shadow, Mountain Beast, and they love her. EG loves her. Sylvis is, you know, Sylvis. We don't talk about that guy. That guy has some issues, and he's honestly disgusting when you really look between the lines. But isolation, and I believe isolation leads to false power. So now you have an idea of Ranni when it comes to her, one of her key mindset traits is that she has a sense of isolation and false power. And of course she's a demigod and stuff like that. I'm not saying she's not strong or anything like that, but false power. Have you noticed that Ranni has cut herself off from her own self? Like the whole duality of the face and stuff like that. I think it really shows the image that she cut herself physically and emotionally. Like, of course, she still has emotions here and there, and she still talks in a way like she's not like brain dead, like inhumane or anything like that. But she's a doll, and she sacrificed so much of her humanity. And I believe that's almost like goes down to like the whole Virgil thing. I know I'm bringing Virgil in here, I'm bringing that in there, I'm bringing this in there, I'm talking about theories and bringing that in there. Ranni is an interesting character, extremely difficult to talk about. But I think that brings into the whole Virgil idea. And the whole Virgil is like that he also sacrificed his humanity, but he became weaker in the process. Although, you know, it's been a while since I've been catched up with the lore, so don't quote me on that exactly, but I believe that's what Virgil has done. It's been a while since I played any Devil May Cry stuff or anything like that, and I haven't even watched the anime yet, which I highly recommend to do so. I heard it's really good. I plan to watch it in the following month. So maybe in a vlog I'll talk about Devil May Cry, the anime. But let's get back on track. One is that, like, I believe that she cut herself physically and emotionally, and sometimes doing that stuff, I would say almost 98% of the time, it leads to more bad than good. It leads to actually becoming weaker and more defeated in the process, because, you know, you lose a sense of your own well-being, and your own well-being, like, it doesn't matter. You almost put yourself in a cage, you know, and you almost inflict self-damage, and that damage could almost never be recovered. So the take from this is that isolation is false power. And when you have that sense of isolation, you also cut yourself off physically and emotionally, and obviously mentally, and that leads to you being weaker in every way possible. So that's the one thing to avoid. Another thing is that she's vulnerable, and there's nothing wrong with showing that you're vulnerable, but she shows her fear of being vulnerable. She has a strong sense of fear of being vulnerable, which leads her to do insane amount of things. Now, you already know, if you watch the Godfrey video, how I think about Godwin. Godwin will have his own video, but she killed Godwin to free herself. Now, I heard a theory, obviously I'm bringing in another theory, but I heard a theory that Godwin and Ranni were actually married or engaged or some way like that. That's why she clearly targeted him. I also heard another theory that doesn't involve that in general. What I just talked about with the whole marriage thing is that Miquella needed a vessel, so Ranni and Miquella plan basically exchanging power and techniques and all this other stuff to go kill Godwin. Basically, they were working together to bring down the Golden, well, not to bring down the Golden Order, it's just a byproduct of what they want. But basically, they plan together to kill Ranni, what the hell? Kill Godwin. And Miquella was supposed to use Godwin's body as the vessel, but it was... Who knows if Miquella actually knew what he was getting himself into, or if Ranni basically threw him on the bus, but we don't know. But basically, Miquella was trying to cure Godwin, give him a true death so he can use his body. Never happened. Obviously, you can tell by the DLC, never happened. So he needed to find a different one. Moog got the short end of the stick, basically. Now, that's Moog. Let's talk about Moog real quick. Very off topic, extremely off topic, not even connected to Ranni at all. Moog is such an interesting character. I wish we got more about him in the DLC. I really thought we would get more about him or his past or anything like that. Sucks. I think Moog is an extremely good character for what he was, you know. I wish we knew more about him, but there's very little information. The more we get more information about the outer god that he serves than Moog himself, so... extremely sad, honestly. I think he was a cool, dynamic character. And he also had drip, so can't never complain about that. But let's get back on track. I'm sorry if I'm getting off track. You know, this video is going to be all over the place as always, more than all the other videos. But let's get back on track what I was talking about, which is the real life lesson is that growth requires connection. And Ranni, like I said, has loose connections, especially towards other people. No companionship, no true companionship. You know, I believe she develops companionship later on with us, but I also think she's highly influenced us to walk in that path. But let's disregard that in general. And talk about that once again. What I said, I'm gonna restate, is that growth requires connection, not hiding from others, not building connections, not doing this. It doesn't matter what traits you're trying to have. So sort of small things like daily habits of like, hey, do I want to, you know, fix my sleeping schedule or anything like that, to bigger things like running a business or going to school or a degree or anything like that, and having dedication, because in order to receive that dedication and that degree of your hard work, it requires a sense of connection. And connection requires a lot of, you know, that physical and physical, what the hell, that physical, oh, I can't speak, physical and mental, that physical and emotional and mental connection. There we go. I was struggling to say that. I don't know why I was playing low on it, like low, physical low, mental low. I don't know why I was doing that. I must have, my thoughts are running out of 100%. My notes are very all over the place, if you can tell by this video. But I think this is how Ranni's interpreted it. Like, it's extremely hard because it's like all over the place. This is how I'm describing Lunar Princess Ranni is how Lunar Princess Ranni actually is. And that's not me bringing up Mikola. I think Mikola video will also be like this. Like Mikola, oh, don't even get me started on Radigan America. So a lot of more. There'll be more of this. Just saying. But let's talk about another thing. Is that Ranni sacrifices a lot, and sometimes sacrificing can be good. You know, you're gonna have to sacrifice some things. Especially for me, I sacrifice as well. But sometimes sacrificing everything is not always worth it. It's just not. Like, there's so many things that could happen so extremely bad for that person who sacrifices a lot. I have suffered this as well. Sometimes sacrificing too much leads to consequences later down, and not just for what you want, but for who you are. A lot of the things we're talking about is what Ranni did and her actions to actually sacrifice all these people despite them giving consent or anything like that, like Blythe and E.G. and them. But it's just, sacrificing really depends on the character and how far you're actually willing to go. And, you know, Ranni was willing to go all the way. So it really depends on you. But I will say this, sacrificing requires a lot of mental fortitude. And even then, I highly recommend to not do it. You will regret. Unless it's a sacrifice that you're willing to do and is qualified in many different qualities. What I mean by qualified in many different qualities is that, will you not regret it? Do you know it's something that you can sacrifice? If it's like something small or something like that, or something that's truly meaningless, then yeah, sacrifice it. But, you know, she sacrifices people and stuff like that, people that are really close to her. Of course, you know, she loves them and stuff like that. She even says that when she goes off into her Dark Moon journey, or whatever she says, her voyage, that she sacrifices like E.G. and Blythe. But really goes to show that, you know, we don't know. And sometimes the unknown is more fearful than the actual event. And what I mean by that is that we don't know if she had to, but she did, you know. That also goes to what I believe when it comes to connecting with people, is that if you know someone that's sacrificing, right, and you know that you don't know, you're not knowledgeable about the options they have. Maybe it's the only option they have. Sure, like Ranni. There's nowhere it says that was the only option she has. She was doing that. She was actively doing that. We don't know for sure if that's the only option she has. So in real life, I highly recommend, if you know someone that's going to sacrifice something, or you know could sacrifice something, that you make sure you talk to them, make sure they're good, and make sure they know they have options. You sometimes fall into that idea, like how like Itachi was, the ultimatum. Itachi from Naruto, another character I'm going to reference in this video. But you know, I feel like you fall into that trap where you feel like you're stuck in the decision when in reality you're not. That also applies to other people you know in real life and yourself. There's always going to be options. Always. It doesn't matter. In any situation, there will always be options. Even though it feels like there's only one option, there is always going to be a hidden option or options. So never forget that. But what I'm going to leave you off for this category for the mindset is that mature people communicate, and Ranni does not communicate at all. She never explains to us that sacrificing E.G. Blythe and everyone else that come in contact with her, whether it be the Black Knife Assassins or anything like that, was the only option. We don't know. It was the option she chose, and that's why it's the only thing we know of, because it's the option she chose. But we don't know if that was the only option. So communicate, communicate, communicate. Another thing we're going to talk about is business and career lessons. Now, Ranni has some pretty good traits in this category. I would say good traits in terms of negative and positive. So let's talk about the quick positives real quick. One is bargaining. She negotiates. You know, when you do Roger's quest line, she knows that you're trying to seek the other half of like the rune of death or whatever it's called. But she still says yeah. She's like, yeah, we'll do a deal, a trade or something like that. You get what I want. You go get the knife and the finger blade. The finger slayer blade. Yeah, the finger slayer blade. You go get the knife, and I'll give you the location of the rune of death. So pretty good negotiation skills there. You know, negotiating could always be good in any type of business or career. Remember that. Ranni does embody that like entirely. Like even outside of that, what example I give, she almost gives that sense of like, you know, a trade. You know, that sense of not like sales, but you know, you get a sense of it, like a sense of trade. You know, you trade something with her and you get something back and you receive something. But another thing I want to talk about, what's really good about Ranni's like connections to business and career lessons, is that her team is loyal. And to, you know, Ranni must have been a different person back then, and she still has the sense of, you know, embodiment of what she was before. And you could tell because, you know, a lot of people have done her quest line and basically got married with her and all this other stuff and did the Age of the Stars. I as well. So I have also fell victim to that, you know, the whole charm thing. Sure, if you believe that, but I say half charm because, you know, despite that, we don't get charmed by Mikola. Obviously in the boss fight you do, but that's not canon, you know, we don't get charmed. But what I was talking about is that she like has the sense of leadership, and I know I say leadership in a lot of these videos, but she has a sense of leadership that really carries over to her team, and you can see that the people under her, except for Sylvis, we don't talk about Sylvis once again, is that she embodies the sense of loyalty in them. I will say this though. I believe it does play a big part in their childhood. I believe the childhood does play a big part. Obviously, they all knew each other since childhood, but she also does that to us. So no matter how many influence we did, us as the people in real life chose her. So that just goes to show the sense of leadership and the sense of character traits she has. And you can apply that to business and career lessons. So just remember that leadership and your traits really do matter. People see you for what you are and what you do in your actions. So show them that you can handle it and put the loyalty in them like how E.G. and Blythe had it. But let's talk about the negatives when it comes to business and career lessons. One, no team building. She has like OG members from back in the day, E.G. Blythe, all this stuff. Sylvis probably was around maybe later on, but I'm pretty sure Sylvis has been around the block for a while. So you know, she doesn't build any new person, except for probably that Bloodhound now. This video is very all over the place. My mind is racing at 10,000 per second, basically. But, you know, she does have that Bloodhound Knight, but Bloodhound Knights are how their name describes hounds, really. They're more bestial than actual, like, you know, egotistical mindset in terms of, like, you know, having their own individual self. To be able to communicate like Sylvis, trash Sylvis. But yeah, no team building. Like she doesn't build no teams or anything like that. And all her team members she do work with, she either sacrifices or cuts off or basically plays the game of finessing them, basically lying to them and stuff like that. So highly recommend not to do that. seems pretty like simple and out there, like, yeah, don't lie to your team or anything like that. But you'd be surprised, and it's very out there, especially with companies these days. They do not care about you. A lot of them don't. So just going with that mindset, how if you were to take a leadership position in terms of career lessons or business, just don't do that. Be better. Don't fall into the trap of that negative mindset and the negative aspect of traits and stuff like that, and it leads to a worse team. So remember that. Another thing is that trust. She hides a lot. Ranni hides almost everything and almost every trait she has. Almost, you have to really look between the lines to see what the true traits are. Because she'll say one thing and do another. She'll say she's like that, and then she'll do another. And then she'll show that she has this trait, and then you later on that you figure out that she was lying and it was a false trait. So, trust. Build trust. Trust is what's gonna make you really reveal your true colors, and just don't hide anything. Obviously, you must be strategic about how you apply things, obviously, but just don't hide anything. Come on, be better. But that's the business and career lesson. Seems very simple, right? But it's very effective. Like, I don't think people realize that all these things apply. Like the whole premise is like, she was charmed, she half charmed us and all this stuff, and she lies and all this stuff. But that just applies to like almost anything, especially business. Do not lie in business. Like, that will come back and get you. But let's talk about the next category I have here, which is relationship lessons. Yes, relationship. Now, this is a new category compared to the Sir Ansbach or Godfrey's one. I'm pretty sure I touched upon them lightly. But when I say relationship, is because you can actually get married to her in the game. You can actually get married to her. So she is, the God and you are the Lord. So let's talk about relationship. Obviously, this is going to relate to like friendship, companionship, and all that stuff, but also romantics. One, Ranni is distant. Until you can really, I guess even after you marry her, she's distant and cold. But she is a lot more warmer. Don't get me wrong, she's a lot more warmer, but she is distant. And being distant in a relationship is never really good at all. Doesn't matter what argument you're trying to prove, being distant is not good. Especially when you're in a relationship like how you were with Ranni. So it's never going to be good for that distant trait. Do not have that distant trait in your relationships. Now, I'm going to touch a very simple premise on relationships when it comes to romantics, because, you guys are your own individual character. You guys can choose for yourself. I'm not here to be your therapist, your love cupid. That's for you to decide and for you to choose what's right. But the real question is, when it comes to relationships, there's no connection, which means there's no real emotional payoff. Ranni sacrifices, and a lot of people do that in relationships, and sometimes it could be good, or lead to better things, but a lot of times a good chunk of it actually leads to worse things. So do not sacrifice yourself in these relationships, whether it be friendship, companionship, parentship, or anything like that. Romantics, obviously, as well. But a lot of things that emotionally unavailable leads to loneliness on both parties, so don't forget that as well. Being lonely is a very, very strong negative trait. It will lead to many different things, conditions, mental disorders. Just true loneliness can lead to many other things, and then God forbid, even worse things, such as the whole let's not talk about that though. But it can lead to that stuff, and that we have to talk about it because it's a real life thing. So no connections means a lot of negative traits, and one of them being loneliness, which leads to the whole mindset thing. Earlier I said it was isolation. These things can really, really affect you. Do not disregard them at all. Another thing is that she has a lot of control over the relationship, and sometimes you're gonna need that for certain events and situations. But she does it in a very negative way, extremely negative way. Everything is on her terms, and you just have to comply. That's just how it is. I know she's like a demigod and stuff like that, but in your own relationships, just make sure it's not like that. Just make sure it's not like that. Each relationship is different, so, but that just leads to manipulation. A lot of people think manipulation is one thing or another. The best thing to analyze manipulation is sacrifice. Remember, If you're willing to sacrifice a huge chunk, and you know those chunks of like what you sacrifice could be hobbies or anything like that that you really truly love, then I would say it comes close to manipulation. That's one of the key qualifications for manipulation. Another thing I can leave you Another thing I can leave you with for this category is don't idolize the cold love and everything like that, like, you know, the whole like red flag toxic traits. Don't idolize that in your relationships. Don't do that stuff. Like, don't romance that type of thing. Remember, trust, warmth, and support are the key traits you're looking for, and that's what really matters more than anything. A lot of people will say communication, all this stuff, which is true. Communication is key. I say that in almost everything. It doesn't matter if it's career, relationships, or not. But I will say this: warmth, trust, and support are better for relationships, for love, because, you know, romance is more than just love. It's also a clash of two characters, you and your partner. And it's that a lot of people like to say relationships or love involve those things. They're just bridges to other things. They're just bridges to other categories, such as communication and such as companionship and all this other stuff. So do not forget that romance is important, but romance is not everything. And if you're looking for the key traits in romance, it should be warmth, trust, and support. But let's talk about the next category. The next one I have here is leadership and influence. Pretty much self-explanatory one. Like I said, Ranni is, like I said in the Jack is a Mimic video. I didn't say that, but what I was talking about in this video is that she has a lot of influence over us, and it just leads to good and bad. I wouldn't say it's all bad, but it just leads to a lot, and this influence can lead to a more false idea and false advertisement, false everything, especially in business and stuff like that. So when there's false and people find out about it, it just leads to a lot of bad traits that you could just never recover from, whether that be business or whatnot. So make sure your influence remains true. If you're going to have influence over something, or make sure it remains true to what the image is, or remains true to what you're trying to achieve, or anything like that, because eventually people will find out. Another thing is that she has a strong sense of vision when it comes to leadership, but that vision requires a lot of sacrifice. Once again, that word sacrifice. In leadership, sacrifice may be required, yes, but not in the way Ranni does it. Just a quick reminder. Another thing, I'm not going to run on as the whole sacrifice thing I did earlier, but we're going to talk about freedom when it comes to leadership. Her leadership lacks freedom. The people under her cannot have a sense of freedom in terms of what they do and their traits and stuff like that. Obviously, that's just rough guideline. There's a lot more underlying stuff, but that's just a general premise that her leadership lacks freedom, and yours should not lack freedom at all. Make sure it has a sense of control, yes, but also a sense of independent actions and love and freedom. Once again, freedom. But what I have for you for this quick section was, don't follow people just because they seem smart or powerful. Look at actually what they built. So look what they actually built. Ranni has a crazy resume in the Lands Between, so that just goes to show that, hey, don't follow them because they're smart or powerful. Does this align with you truly? And when it comes to leadership, also think about that in self-reflection when you're actually doing your leadership stuff, whether that be business or whatnot, and be like, hey, does this actually apply to my team and myself? Do they have a sense of freedom, or are they just following me for the check? Are they just following me for the money? Are they following me just because I have opportunities for them in the future, or it was the only opportunity available for them? And also apply that to yourself. Talk about the people you follow in your life. Be like, hey, do I fall in this category? Do I just follow them because it's an opportunity that was just given to me? Do I follow them because, you know, I like what they built, or am I just here for the check or anything like that? Remember that self-reflection will be key to building other amazing traits and skills later on, and mindset and it introduces new mindset traits that can really help later on. especially in different things such as philosophy and actually understanding yourself and improve self-reflection, and for myself, being closer to God. But I'm gonna leave you with some final things. Ranni is an interesting character. This is just my take and my interpretation of it. But Ranni is an interesting character, you know. I would say she's more of a tragic figure than anything else. I wouldn't say she's a hero. I wouldn't say she's a villain. She's done some pretty bad things, but everyone has a lines between. Like, a lot of people like to hype Radon up, like, oh, you know, he was a hero and whatnot. He was a war hero. He killed a bunch of people. And I think people forget that. He killed a bunch of people. People who were just defending their homes. Like, when he assaulted the capital during the Shattering War, though many of the soldiers that died were just defending their homes and their land and their capital. Like, imagine if your capital got attacked and, like, you're in the capital and, like, what, you're just gonna die? No, you're gonna take up arms to protect. And Radon killed them. You know, maybe it might be an honorable way to go out, you know, and I'm pretty sure he didn't do anything like super merciless or anything like that, but he still killed them. Like, you know, he's not a hero. He's a war hero. It's completely different. But let's go back to Ranni. Her story warns us about isolation over connection, which is true. Isolation should not be any key trait in anyone's life, basically. Connection should be the main thing, especially when you learn from Ranni's mistakes. Another thing is to not focus too much on control, but focus on yourself. Control what you can control, and trust people. And even if they do bad things to you and stuff like that, forgive. You know, the Bible says that too. Forgive your enemies, forgive them. And I highly recommend to do that yourself. You know, forgive them, and don't focus too much on control. Who cares about that? Just control what you can control. Control yourself. Control that. Another thing is that her leadership lacks freedom. Remember that her leadership lacks freedom, and she lacks trust in that leadership. She doesn't rely on a lot of leadership because I feel like she doesn't trust her own self with leadership. And if she does do leadership stuff, usually false leadership, which leads to false power, which also leads to isolation and all those other bad negative traits. Now, lastly for this category, for this final reflection I have here on my notes, is that everything that she has done was through sacrifice, and that sacrifice led to many destruction and death and many qualities that just made things worse. Doesn't matter how you look at it or anything like that, it made things worse. Now, sacrifice is an interesting topic, and it relates to each person individually, so it really just depends on you how you view that. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys really did enjoy this really long video. This is going to be like an hour long. But Ranni's an interesting character and has a lot of negative traits. I know this video is more on the negative side, but we just had to talk about all the negative traits to avoid when it came to Ranni. Like I said before, I think Ranni is an amazing character. And I gave you guys my viewpoint on how I see Ranni, and that influenced all these negative traits that came from that influence, which I highly recommend. The last recommendation I have here is the Jack is a Mimic lore video. This one right here on screen once again. So I really hope you guys enjoyed my Elden Ring lesson take when it came to Ranni. Keep in mind that if my opinion has changed in the future, just like with the Sir Ansbach or the Godfrey video, I will make an updated version or a new version. But this is just how I view Ranni right now. And the last thing I'm gonna leave you guys here is love with purpose. Have love with purpose, and forgive your enemies. And you know, prayer is important. But thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, you're amazing. You're awesome even. So thank you very much. And also, I know I'm adding more things on, but this is the last thing. I promise this is the last thing. Sorry if I all over the place in this video. I will try to cut most of it out, but I am gonna leave some stuff in because I just think it adds character to the video. But you know, forgive me if this video is all over the place. I am a little tired. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. So you know, that's just how it is when you're running a business. So that's just the go-tos. But the Ranni video is done. Highly recommend that the check the post tab. You know, the post tab will have updates about the future and the schedules and the videos. And you can I plan to do more votes about the future videos. So check that out. The post tab should be on the channel. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.